Welcome to the First Nations Speaker Series. I'd first like to acknowledge the country I'm on tonight, Gadigal country, and I'd like to acknowledge all countries where you may be tuning in from. I would also like to extend that respect by acknowledging elders past, present, and emerging. The First Nations Speaker Series is a program in partnership with GML Heritage and the Deep Research Centre at the Australian National University. Tonight we are thrilled to have Dr. Virginia Keft joining us. Dr. Keft is a proud Muruwari woman. She is the First Nations producer at the NCA, also a practicing artist, curator, and award-winning researcher. Dr. Keft will be presenting Art Yarns, a culturally responsive contemporary art program that helps supports First Nations elders and community living with dementia. We are thrilled to have her here tonight presenting on such an important topic. Please be sure to share what country you're on tonight in the chat and also add any questions you have in the chat. Charlotte will be facilitating Q&A section at the end, and that will wrap up tonight's talk. I would now like to welcome Dr. Virginia Keft.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Sammy, for having me. And it's just such an honour to be here tonight to speak for the First Nations series. So I'm really excited. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to begin a presentation in a moment, a PowerPoint presentation. But I just wanted to say that I would love to hear your questions throughout. So if you have anything, I'm going to keep it quite light. So if there's anything that you're thinking about as I'm speaking, please feel free to put it in the chat. And I'd love to have a bit of a yarn with you about those questions at the end. So just a warning to let any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here know that the following presentation does contain images and names of people who have passed on from us. I thank you, Sammy, for your lovely acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge that I am on beautiful Dharawal country. At the moment, I also have the honour of working on Gadigal country at the MCA as the Arts and Dementia Program Coordinator for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island programs. But tonight, I want to pay my deepest respects to the elders and custodians of the land on which I walk and live. I'm a guest on this beautiful land, the unceded lands of the Dharawal peoples, and I acknowledge the lands of the peoples on which all of us gather today. So I respect their ongoing custodianship of these places and honour elders past, present and future. And this lovely image here is an image of Gira, also known as Mount Kira, which I have the great pleasure of looking at every single day. So I feel very, very fortunate indeed. So I'm going to leave you a little image here of some beautiful country. I would like for you to, if you have nearby you a piece of paper, I'm going to take you through an activity that Art Yarns uses, the program that is presented at the MCA. And if you could get your piece of paper, it can be anything that's nearby. I've just got a little plain piece of paper. And to do this, what we're going to do is think about the places we've been, the places that we've walked, and the places that our people before us have walked, and what they bring through time with them and have gifted us throughout that process. If you are sitting down while you're watching the presentation, I'd really love for you to put your feet flat on the floor and think about the ground that you are on today. I have my feet on the floor here, and beneath that is Dharawal country. And I'm thinking about that space, that country, the people who've lived here and looked after this beautiful place. And with my piece of paper, I'm going to scrunch it. So I want you to just slowly bring that piece of paper to you and listen what the sound makes. Is it a crackle? Is it a scrunch? Does it remind you of anything? Is there anything in that paper that makes you feel a memory, a way of thinking about the world, the space that we live on? I'm going to open it back up again. I'm going to bring this piece of paper open And on this, we have lines. Many, many tiny, intricate lines. And these lines can represent our path, the path of our people before us, the people who were important to us, the people that bring their stories to us, the stories that we then walk through our life with, and the importance of those for us. If we were doing an activity like this in the Art Yarns program, we might then take a pen, a pencil, some kind of writing implement, and trace some of those lines and think about those journeys and how those lines interact with our world around us. When we think about yarns, when we think about mob, one of the first things that comes up is where you're from, who you mob. And I would like to share with you where I'm from and who my mob is, because this is really integral to what Art Yarns is about. It's not just a contemporary art program. It is definitely not an educational program. It is a program that hopes to support and nurture ways of being creative and connecting with other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And the first thing that we ask each other in community is, where are you from and who are your mob? So I'm a proud Murrawari woman. My mob are from far northwest New South Wales, Brewarrina and Wilmaringal. My family are the Shearers, and this photo is one of my favourite images of me and my great-grandfather, George Shearer. In this photo, I was about 4 years old, and I was given the incredibly important task of taking, we called him old grandfather, the old grandfather for a walk. And it's just a really beautiful, special photo to really connect me with who I am and my mob. So that's old grandfather. And here is my great-grandfather, George Shearer, and his daughter, my grandmother, Auntie Mary Shearer. And great-grandfather was born on Corella Station in Brewarrina in 1893 and died at 91 years old in 1984. So to give you a bit of context on my story, so next, Granny Shearer. Here's Granny Shearer and I. Several years ago, my grandmother, Auntie Mary Shearer, was diagnosed with vascular dementia. In January 2021, I took on the new role of Art and Dementia Coordinator for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander programs at the Museum of Contemporary Art Australia. So my interest in thinking about Art Yarns and what that is doing for community is not just a professional one, it's a personal one. And I think sometimes good work can be done there when we feel passionate about the things that we're doing. And my role when I began this particular role at the beginning of 2021 was to investigate the needs and gaps in the museums and gallery sector for programs that were specifically for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to support people who were living with dementia, and then to facilitate and create a program for that to support the community. So here we are. Bangawarra Art Yarns for Older and Elder Mob. This is the program that has been developed over this time. And I guess the last 10 months has shown, 12, 14 months, has shown us the chaos of COVID and amid several lockdowns. I spent time building the program and creating those connections with community, facilitating yarning circles and discussions about what was needed, where the gaps were, how a program like this could potentially do something really positive, why it's needed, and just went to work to really think about those questions of what was happening in community and why we would need a program like this in the first place. So we went through in that time research and development stages, consultation, community engagement, collaboration, the development of a visual identity, which you see here. This is a visual identity that I created for the program. It included a painting, some symbols for a logo, and some other collateral, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on. Then we went to the recruitment of participants, and finally to present the first online program. In September 2021, we went on to present another online program, and now we're in the middle of an in-person program, which I'll talk about a little bit more soon as well. COVID did change everything. The program was initially intended to be an in-person program, but with the advent of COVID and all of the lockdowns that we had, the shift to online proved to be really productive, and really shifted the perspective. It did mean some big changes very quickly, but I think in the end they were actually really positive changes. So a little bit about Art Yarns. What is it? So Bangawarra Art Yarns for Older and Elder Mob is a free contemporary art program delivered by the MCA. It is specifically for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander older people and elder people, their families and their care networks. And I specifically put in here their families and care networks because it's not just about a particular participant and one carer. The program really does facilitate a family-oriented notion of support and care, and being able to create that creative space with family and not just for one participant and their care partner. So Art Yarns proposes to provide positive art experiences for older people in an informal shared social environment. Importantly, Art Yarns is entirely Aboriginal designed, implemented and delivered. This was really important, and in my very first days at the MCA, this was the first thing that I felt needed to be understood in developing a program like this. It really had to come from the Aboriginal community, and in the process of that, it will have its best opportunity for a sustainable outcome. And yeah, Art Yarns launched an online program in September 2021. So a little bit about the scope. What's it about? The program contributes to filling the considerable gap in current wellbeing services available to those living with dementia in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community. And when I say wellbeing services, I'm really talking about programming that does not use medicalised terminology and doesn't focus on dementia, but really talks about the kinds of cultural creative needs that might be met with a particular program like this, rather than one that has anything to do with medicalised terms. It provides an engaging and collaborative space to yarn, connect and create. Number one, I feel like Art Yarns really does do this. And the experiences that I've had already with Art Yarns really shows that actually does happen. I'm going to give you a bit of an experience of what that looks like with some pictures of our programming in a little while. So key to the development of the program is an understanding and commitment to the principles of self-determination. The program has been entirely developed, led and delivered by Aboriginal staff and artist educators. The artist educators that work on the program are really key to what happens in Art Yarns, and together they and I work to develop the programs with their practices in mind too. So all of our artist educators are practicing artists themselves. We acknowledge and are committed to developing and maintaining respectful relationships with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and this includes extensive consultation in both an informal and formal capacity with Aboriginal community stakeholders, the MCA's Aboriginal Staff and Advisory Committee, and local and national Aboriginal networks and individuals. So a little bit about dementia. It's an important part of the program, but it also in some ways takes a back seat, which I'll give you more information about in a moment. But the statistics are really important to have a bit of an understanding. And I think a lot of people don't know, if you haven't learned much about dementia, dementia is nationally recognised as one of the largest growing health concerns across the population in Australia. But what's really alarming is that the dementia prevalence amongst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples is almost 5 times higher than that of the general population. there are a whole bunch of factors for this particular high statistic, which we won't go into, but it's there. Dementia also occurs at a significantly younger age of onset in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as compared with the rest of the population, which is important to note. Okay. So why is art yarns important? An increasing body of literature examines the positive role that art and art galleries play in the facilitation of programs which promote social engagement and inclusion for those living with dementia. And as I mentioned earlier, research shows there is a really huge gap in programming that supports older Aboriginal Australians who are living with dementia or at risk of developing the disease. Interestingly, in the process of developing the program, it became really apparent that the audience age was a lot younger than what we'd had expected. And I think that created a whole shift in the way that we thought about it. Families needed to be supported in this space rather than thinking about the program as just one for older people. There is a gap along, in arts programming in general, and specifically for older people. So Art Yarns considers the important role that yarning and art making in a culturally safe environment may play in supporting wellbeing, particularly when connections to culture, country, kinship, knowledge systems and beliefs are strengthened. And I think that this is a really key element to what Art Yarns is doing, in that, I return to the point that I made earlier that Art Yarns is not an education program. So we're not in the process of attempting to educate about art or tell people how to do art. It's a facilitation of creative moments and coming together with other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in a way that allows for cultural connection in a meaningful way. That's where we're going with this. So let's have a little look at what is dementia. Dementia is an umbrella term with over 100 diseases that may cause the disease. Dementia describes the collection of symptoms that are caused by disorders affecting the brain, and it is not just one specific disease. Some of the common symptoms of dementia, but these definitely are not limited to these particular ones. There are many more than this, but a decline in ability to think clearly, some memory loss, deterioration of cognitive function, changes in behaviour, changes to visual and spatial perceptions, and the ability to perform everyday tasks. Not every person living with dementia will experience every symptom, and these can vary and change over time. There is no cure for dementia-related brain disease, and as the disease progresses, a person living with dementia can become increasingly isolated. And there are different needs for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, so therefore a program needs to address those particular differences and needs in the creation of that program. So it's some of those challenges the challenges associated with creating the program. I think it's a good place for me to share some of those because it's not an easy process to create this. Oops, what am I doing? Just a moment. Okay. So some of the complexities and culturally appropriate ways of talking about dementia as a medical term. There is no Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander words in language for dementia, which is, it's interesting because in some ways the particular symptoms of dementia aren't understood equally across different cultural places. There is a stigma attached to brain disease combined with variable levels of dementia literacy and a general mistrust of mainstream institutions. So the challenge to deliver and design an art program for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander audiences who are living with or at risk of developing dementia, while acknowledging the complexities of talking about dementia. not an easy task to create a program for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are living with dementia or at risk of dementia without really talking about dementia. But I think that, you know, those challenges have been slowly unraveling. And one of the really key things that happened at the beginning of the program and getting the ball rolling, I suppose, was to make a clear decision that Art Yarns participants do not need any formal diagnosis of dementia, no referrals, no medicalised speak, and no intrusive questions. So we're really talking about, you know, if we kind of go several steps down the line, dementia prevention and thinking about ways of increasing the chances of slowing dementia is really where we're going with this too. So the unique challenges means that Art Yarns audiences need to be built slowly at a pace that fits. So the Art Yarns approach. Bangawarra is a Darug word meaning to create or make. And at the heart of Bangawarra Art Yarns is the idea that yarning, sharing, and making art is an enabler to create connections in multiple ways. So this is a really key and important part of the Art Yarns approach to programming and the way that we do things within the program, within the structure, and within the key ideas. So key to the delivery of Bangawarra Art Yarns is the team of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artist educators. And each of these artists really do bring their own cultural connections to support the conversations and art process. But importantly, the sessions are self-directed by the participants. And I think really this is an important way that, that this program does differ from some other programs, in that we haven't decided on strict structures and ideas and talking at our elders, that would be culturally inappropriate. It's more about self-directed. The process of yarning is there. You know, we spend quite a long time at the beginning of each session doing that culturally appropriate way of talking. Where are you from? Who are your mob? Sharing something about one another, and in that way, the facilitation of cultural connection, creative connection, and social engagement is created within the program. Self-direction is really important. So a little bit about what our loose structure looks like, and this image here is from one of our online programs. The three people you can see at the top are myself in the middle and Akayla on the left and Marinda on the right. Some of you may know them. They're amazing. They're the artist educators who are working on Art Yarns with me at the moment. So each of our programs will all begin with a extended acknowledgement of country. And what I mean by extended acknowledgement is that we don't just say some words, we really do allow for a greater space of acknowledgement of country. And in that way, facilitating that moment of sharing. So everybody in the group is able to share something if they want to. Meditations and thinking about space and where we are sitting, a little bit like what I started with in the beginning of our session. A yarning circle, this is really important, you know, what have you been up to, what are you doing, you know, having a bit of a yarn is a really important part of what we're doing. An artist introduction and quote. So each of our sessions looks at a different artist, often in the MCA art collection. And we really prioritise the artist's voice. So we will show the artwork. If we're in person, we'll talk about it. We have images or we'll show them in the galleries. And online, we share our screens so that everybody can see. And we really prioritise that voice. So an artist will have some words that goes with that. And that really facilitates that sharing of ideas about the art and talk. So everybody has an opportunity to say, what do you see? How does it make you feel? Those are the kinds of provocation questions that we might ask. And of course, in those questions, there is no right and wrong. You know, how does the art make you feel? What do you see? And then we'll go through some art making. And you know, we often will use art materials that everybody will have, pieces of paper, a glass of water, even, you know, we do some playful experimental kinds of art as well. Sharing is a really important part, you know, sharing the kinds of works that we do, and everybody gets an opportunity to talk about it. And then a sense of grounding, and goodbyes. So I'm just going to go through some pictures of a few different ways that we might create this structure and create the program. So here's an image of a wonderful work by Shirley Purdy, Guwalum Gijam Gija plants. This is in the MC8 collection. This is one of the ones that we've looked at with the Art Yarns program, and it always creates a really wonderful discussion. Shirley Purdy created these, I feel like I want to say 72 art pieces. Let me just double check, do the right thing. Yes, 72 small paintings, and they are a kind of encyclopedia of medicinal plants, and they're really very beautiful and have a really lovely texture to them. So we will often zoom in and on the online, or people can come up close and have a little look at those. And then we will share some words about this. So Shirley Purdy says, I made these paintings about the things I saw when I was growing up. They show the things my old women told me. They are about bush food, the things we can eat in the bush, fruits like black plum and that kind of thing, and bush honey. Others that I painted show those trees used to make artifacts like fighting sticks, digging sticks, and coolamons. Other paintings show the grasses that people used to use to make the spinifex resin that they used to join axe heads to the handles. So Shirley Purdy is sharing some really important parts of her culture, of her place in the East Kimberley, and in really foregrounding the artist's words when we look at the paintings. That really facilitates a discussion about those things. You know, often we will have a beautiful moment with this particular artwork. In the programming, we asked participants to bring with them a little twig or something from the garden, or a plant or a herb that they have in the kitchen, and you know, so there's a sensory expression there, and the discussions about what Shirley Purdy is talking about always expands into a kind of personal experience, which is really nice. It's really lovely to hear those experiences from everyone. But that artist's voice is an important part of the program. Here's another image of an artwork as everybody's looking at this particular piece, and experiencing each other's interactions about this and talking about it. So we're really interested to hear what everybody thinks about the piece and their feelings, what they felt when they saw it. Here's a lovely image of the sharing art part of the program. So everybody had done something there that spoke of their connection to a plant in their mind or in their hand, or something that they created in after looking at Shirley Purdy's wonderful work. Here is a lovely image of a creating moment in our in-person program, which we are very excited to be actually in person. We are presenting at Kashula Powerhouse at the moment. We are in week 2 of a 5-week program. And here we can see one of the participants is creating a work in response to a discussion that we had. So in doing these ways of creating and the structural positioning of the program, embedding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways of doing, being and knowing is really important to the program. You know, cultural safety is something that we think carefully about, connection to country, elders and knowledge holders. There is an inclusionary approach, family and community centeredness, rather than taking a more Western model, which would foreground the individual. Art Yarns really does look at that more family approach, which would be more in line with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways of doing, being and knowing. Respectful relationships and a slow approach. The slow approach is one that I feel, you know, it's easy to just flick by that one, but I think it's really important and really does show the ways that we can just slow down, you know, just to really slow down. We don't cram in a million different things into programming, because really that's not what it's about. You know, that slow approach, respectful relationships, listening and learning from elders in the group, you know, and I think that that is, you know, for me personally, that's been really beautiful to be part of that, and to really listen and learn from the elders in these in the Art Yarns programming is really wonderful. And also, I think really important and cannot be underestimated is acknowledging the destructive processes of colonisation and ongoing traumatic impacts on generations of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So the expressions of connection, I've talked a little bit about the value of the online program, but one of the things I didn't mention is that in our initial programming that planned to be on site at various cultural and arts institutions around Sydney and Western Sydney, you know, once we had an online program in place, it really became apparent that the connections were much broader, and we had participants dialing in from across the country. So it really did show that those broad geographical places were really relevant, and there was a benefit to the social and cultural engagement through contemporary art in an online platform. It actually was much more successful than we even thought it would be, which was really nice. Yarns, stories, knowledges are foundational for prioritising Indigenous ways of being, doing and knowing. Here is the image that I created for the program. You know, it was really important to create an identity for the program, and that visual language that participants will recognise, I think is integral to setting up a program that really does speak to the audience that we're talking to. The painting expresses the deep importance of family and cultural connection. The symbols represent meeting places. The shapes show elders and their families sitting together to yarn and share. The colours are a personal representation of my connection to country, and the bright spaces and lines that connect and merge represent the continuity of culture across place and time. So that's to share with you the visual identity that was created for Art Yarns. I'd like to mention our sponsors and the research outcomes. So the NCA program has been made possible by the support of the New South Wales Government through New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice and Create New South Wales, as well as the Jib Foundation. Their wonderful support has been amazing. We have a research partnership with Neuroscience Research Australia. Over the next 8 to 9 months, the research program, the research project will get more underway. So stay tuned for that. You'll hear more about that coming up. But the research outcomes for this partnership are to contribute to understandings around how contemporary art might be used to support the well-being of older Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples living with dementia or at risk of dementia. And I would like to say thank you for coming along and listening to my talk. I'm very keen to hear your questions, and thanks everyone for coming tonight.
Thank you so much, Virginia, for sharing with us tonight your thoughts, ideas and experience on how art and art making support positive connections for people to country and culture. And after such a turbulent couple of years with COVID, it's really great to hear how successful it's been with your online program. So I have a couple of questions here. The first one comes from Catherine Stone, who says, "Hello, Dr. Virginia. This is amazing. Thank you so much. I have a question about the statistic that you mentioned earlier, where Aboriginal people are 5 times more likely to suffer from dementia, and that they're likely to experience it younger. Sorry if you've already explained this, and I missed it, but can you please tell us why Aboriginal people suffer from dementia younger than non-Indigenous people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for that one. So there are actually a lot of different factors, and the intricacies of those are quite nuanced, and wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't be able to go into all of it. But I think really what we're talking about is lower health outcomes in terms of ability to access health services early enough. I think that is a really important part. There are also indications that there is alcohol-related dementia as well. There is an indication that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are not able to get the help that they need at that time, and there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. But there are. I am happy to also add to the chat some really amazing work that's being done by a project called the Koori Growing Old Well project, and Noura are well involved in that, and they are really the experts on this. So I would like to put their link in. And follow up on those statistics with them, because they are doing some amazing work in health and the kinds of improving outcomes for Aboriginal people who are living with dementia. I'll pop that in there at the end of the session. Thank you for the question.
That would be great. Thanks, Virginia. So I have a question as well. So you mentioned that, or you talked about your own sort of personal experience with your grandmother having vascular dementia, and that sort of giving you insight into developing the course. So do you think that that's helped you to develop the course in a unique way, having that sort of personal experience so close in your family?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I mean, looking at the way that dementia is often one of those kinds of diseases that can get pushed aside. How do people react? How do they get involved? How do they find the right ways to support their family members? And I think that my personal experience with that is important. And I also spent some time prior to my work in the program for the MCA as a dancer, and working in programming that supported movement for people living with dementia and other diseases that affected mobility. And that really changed my perspective. I think I really shifted my perspective on that, because when I started working with people, I realized very, very quickly that the beginning of the sessions with people who were living with dementia started with a very low feeling, and I can't really explain it other than that, it was a palpable feeling in the room with people who hadn't had engagement either for that, for that day, for that week, who knows what kind of engagement they'd had. But then after those shared moments, music, talking, allowing for some positive repetitive movements were really pivotal to changing the mood in the room. So I think that my interest in this has been quite a long way back. I'm a dancer by background as well, and I was really fascinated by that and really passionate about how much I knew from a personal perspective that these kinds of wellbeing programs worked, and I didn't have I didn't have anything else to go on except that I was a dancer who created these programs, and had worked in dementia, but not from a carer's perspective, more from a dancer's perspective, and then learned more about it as I went through. So I hope that kind of gives you a bit of insight into where I've come from with this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Virginia. That's great. I've got a couple more questions here, actually, got quite a few. This one comes from Hayden, I believe. Are you able to share any success stories that have resulted from the programme? What are some of the signs or signals of success?
Yeah, great question. Great question. I think one thing really pops into my mind with that question is that after a conversation that I had with a participant who called me up and was asking me about art yarns and how she could potentially join the program and do the online program. She was at the time not only stuck in COVID but also housebound because she was she has a disability. So she found that really isolating on two fronts: COVID plus the disability that really prevented her from getting out and about very easily. And she felt quite disconnected culturally from her Aboriginal community because she wasn't living on country. We talked for ages. We had a good hour-long conversation. And she joined the program. She did it, and then she sent me a message a little bit after this, maybe a week later, and said, "I've picked up my paintbrushes and I've started painting again." And that conversation that we had changed everything. It did change my perspective, and I felt connected for the first time in a long time. And that really resonated. It felt really amazing. So that's a very kind of personal, I guess, outcome. It's not measurable because it's my experience, but it did give me a good push to know that this program was important.
Thanks, Virginia. More questions. Thanks for that. So I have a question from Drew, who says, "Hi, Dr. Virginia. I love the idea of a slow approach. How would you recommend implementing a slow approach into community engagement?"
Yeah, great question, Drew. I think my initial response to that would be to have a cup of tea and a yarn. I really think that's the way. Slow approaches are really about talking, and I think that we're often very quick to to make lists and check lists and write it down and take minutes and create meetings, and I think sometimes that slow approach to doing genuine work is to actually just talk and to go and create those moments in community. So I mean, if you're looking to do that, finding places where community meet and seeing if you can join in and just meet the elders and have a cup of tea, learn how they drink their tea, you go a long way.
That's good. Everybody loves a cup of tea. Thanks, Virginia. I've got another question here, I think, from Hayden, who says, "Thanks, Dr. Virginia. I'm watching from Wongal Land tonight. 2 questions. First, what are some of the surprising challenges that you faced when starting this work? And what are some of your hopes and goals over the coming years with this work and the impact it can continue to make in so many lives?"
Oh, great questions. I'll answer the last one first. I think my goal would be to create resources that are sustainable and ongoing. That would be my main goal, if I put it in a nutshell, so that the program itself has a life beyond me, beyond what I think that the work that is starting with Art Yarns is really quite new, and there needs to be more people doing this and looking for ways to connect with community, but also to make this sustainable. There's really, to me, no point in working out all of this and creating a program to let it fizzle out. And I think that a lot of programs do work that way because funding disappears and you're not able to continue it. So my goal would be to create resources and ways to make this a really ongoing, sustainable project with long-term outcomes that work in different places. I'd really love to be able to work more in care homes and to find ways to do that. I think that, you know, this is going to answer your other question, that some of the challenges, I think, really, I guess my number one challenge is to reach the people who need this, you know, who the people who are living with dementia in care homes. I think that there is a really strong need for cultural programming and culturally appropriate programming, especially for those living with dementia who may not have ways to connect with culture. And so I feel like there's some really important work to be done there, but it's a huge challenge, you know, and it's something that I'm continually working on. And I feel like everything that I'm doing with Art Yarns takes a kind of continuous learning approach. I'm not ever getting to a point where I feel like I've done all of the things or I've done it all perfectly, or, you know, I'm constantly trying to revise and find different ways to do it. It's also very new. So the program has really only been, you know, since the beginning of 2021. So it's a learning process, but the challenges are definitely to try and make sure that we're reaching the people who need this the most.
Yeah, definitely. Hayden says thank you very much, and this might be a little bit of a repetition with the earlier question, but GML Heritage, my colleagues there say, hi Virginia, thanks so much for the presentation. We're wondering, what are some of the markers for program success?
Some of the markers for program success, I think I'm going to go sideways on this question and say, when we've asked people in our programs to give us their impression of the program in a word, they say things that are really positive. We're in the process of research, so the research isn't done yet, so the data isn't there, so we'll get to that. But I think, you know, in the kind of initial processes, in, you know, that kind of thought bubble place that we're at the moment, right at the beginning of this, you know, people are saying things like connection, joy, feeling part of it, you know, strength, culture. You know, these are the kinds of things, and I feel like they are the markers right now. I'm hearing from participants and people who've been part of it and people who want to be part of it that can't be part of it for different reasons, that, you know, there's some really positive ideas coming out of this, and that I feel like the data is going to show more about that, so stay tuned. But hopefully that answers the question a little bit.
Thanks, Virginia, and it does. And, you know, I think, you know, I wish you all the success with such a fabulous program. And so finally, can you tell us about any upcoming workshops that you have in the near future?
Yes, absolutely. So we are currently at Kashula Powerhouse. That is a Friday morning program starting at 10 a.m. We've had 1 week. We welcome people to come along. All Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander participants are welcome. There is a registration on the MCA website, which I will make sure that I share here. But we would love to see people come along to that and share art yarns with us. We will also, after this, be presenting a new online program for participants in August. So we've got a new one. The date has not yet been set, but that will be coming up in August. So we will be inviting people to join us for an online program then.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Virginia. Look forward to sharing that on our forums to help increase participants and awareness for the course. So once again, thank you so much for your very excellent talk tonight. And to everyone else who has joined us tonight, please join us for the next talk in the series, which will be on the 6th of June. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, everyone.